Welcome back to Be Your Own Bank. We're diving into DeFi lending today. You already know the DeFi basics. We're going to jump right into how to make your crypto work for you.
Yeah, like a savings account on steroids with blockchain.
Exactly. No more relying on those banks and their generous interest rates.
All right, DeFi lending protocols like AAVE Compound and MakerDAO let you lend crypto directly to others. No middleman and maybe way higher returns.
So we've got these lending protocols, but before the nitty-gritty, can you remind us about DAOs? They're a big deal here, right?
Absolutely. DAOs are like decentralized co-ops. Rules are baked into smart contracts. Token holders are in control. Think of them as the foundation for many DeFi projects.
Instead of a CEO, the community makes the decisions.
Yeah.
It's a big change from traditional finance.
Exactly. And it's key to what makes DeFi unique. AAVE Compound and MakerDAO are actually DAOs themselves. So communities have a say in how these lending platforms work.
Okay, that makes sense. So let's say I'm ready to lend them. How do these DeFi lending protocols work? Do I have to find borrowers and make loan agreements?
That's the beauty of it. You don't do any of that. Protocols use smart contracts to automate everything. You deposit your crypto into a pool, borrowers get loans from that pool, and pay interest that goes to the lenders.
Interesting, but what about risk? What if someone doesn't pay back their loan? That's always been a worry with traditional lending.
That's where over-collateralization comes in. Borrowers have to put up more collateral than they borrow. Even if collateral value drops, there's still enough to cover the loan. It protects lenders.
Like a safety net built right into the system. Pretty reassuring.
It is. And different protocols have different collateralization ratios. Always good to do your research and understand the specific requirements.
All right, let's walk through a real example. Let's say I want to lend some USDC. How would that work on AAVE?
AAVE is a great example to start. You connect your wallet to AAVE, deposit your USDC, and you'll get AUSDC tokens in return.
AUSDC. So those are my USDC plus any interest I earn.
You got it. And what's cool is your AUSDC balance updates in real time as interest comes in. It's like watching your money grow.
Okay, that's pretty cool. No waiting for monthly interest payments. But what kind of interest rates can I expect on AAVE realistically?
Let's say the APY for supplying USDC is around 5%, just as a hypothetical. With 10,000 USDC, you could potentially earn around $500 in interest over a year.
So way better than any bank would offer.
Yeah.
But you said hypothetical. Does that mean these rates change?
Exactly. DeFi rates are driven by supply and demand, so they can be really dynamic, sometimes higher, sometimes lower, and it can change fast. Just something to be aware of.
Got it. Keeping an eye on the rates is key. Now, what about lending Bitcoin? That seems trickier because Bitcoin isn't directly on Ethereum where AAVE is.
You're right, there's an extra step. To lend Bitcoin on AAVE, you need wrapped Bitcoin, or WBTC, basically a tokenized version of Bitcoin that's on the Ethereum blockchain.
That makes sense. Yeah. So I convert my Bitcoin to WBTC first. Seems like an extra step. Why not just use Bitcoin directly?
Think of it this way. Wrapping your Bitcoin opens up tons of possibilities in the Ethereum DeFi ecosystem. It's the key to lending, borrowing, and other DeFi services that Bitcoin holders wouldn't have access to otherwise.
That's a good point. Okay, so once I have my WBTC, it's similar to lending USDC. Deposit, get AWBTC, and watch the interest grow.
You got it. The core concept is the same. You're supplying WBTC to the AAVE pool and earning interest on that supplied WBTC.
This is starting to make sense. Now, you mentioned DeFi lending being similar to stock dividends. I'm curious about that. How are those two things connected?
It's a great comparison. When you lend crypto, you often get interest in the same crypto you supplied. So with WBTC, you'd earn more WBTC. Now, if Bitcoin goes up, the value of your WBTC and all that WBTC interest you've earned goes up too.
So if Bitcoin doubles in value, my WBTC holdings, including interest, double too. That's different from stock dividends.
Exactly. With stock dividends, you get a fixed dollar amount per share regardless of the price. But in DeFi, your returns are tied to the token's price changes. It's built-in growth.
Wow, that's powerful. You're getting price appreciation on top of the interest. But what if Bitcoin drops? Would my WBTC and interest also lose value?
That's the other side. DeFi lending has potentially higher returns, but also the volatility of crypto. If Bitcoin drops, your WBTC holdings, including interest, will decrease. Remember, potential for higher rewards comes with higher risk.
That's a crucial point. It's not all sunshine and rainbows. Sounds like carefully considering your risk tolerance and researching the protocols and tokens is essential. But before we get into the risks, maybe let's talk more about how taking advantage of price appreciation actually works.
Yeah, that's where collateral withdrawals come in. One of the cool things about DeFi lending.
Collateral withdrawals. Tell me more.
Okay, so imagine your collateral goes way up in value. DeFi lending protocols like AAVE actually let you withdraw some of that collateral while still staying above the required collateralization ratio.
Wait, so if my Bitcoin takes off, I can actually use some of those gains without selling my WBTC or closing my loan?
Exactly, you got it. Like having your cake and eating it too. Let's say you borrowed $10,000 using $25,000 worth of XRP as collateral. If XRP price jumps and your collateral is now worth, say, $500,000,
Okay, I'm following.
you can unlock a bunch of that profit. Like in this case, up to $485,000 while still keeping the required collateralization ratio.
That's incredible. It's like finding extra money you didn't even know you had. But like anything in DeFi, I'm guessing there are risks.
You're always thinking that's good. You're right. No financial system is completely risk-free, especially DeFi.
So what are some specific risks with DeFi lending? What should I watch out for?
Smart contract risk is a big one. These protocols are based on code, and code can have bugs or exploits. It's not common, especially with well-audited protocols like AAVE, but it's a risk to be aware of.
Okay, so security is super important. What else?
Liquidity risk is another thing. In rare cases, you might have to wait when withdrawing funds if there's not enough liquidity in the pool at that moment.
So it's like a crypto traffic jam. Everyone wants their funds at the same time, and things slow down.
That's a great way to put it. It's not common, especially with popular protocols like AAVE, but it's good to keep in mind.
Makes sense. And then there's a volatility we talked about earlier with interest rates changing. How can those impact things?
Interest rates in DeFi are like a roller coaster, up and down quickly based on supply and demand. A rate that looks good today could be much lower tomorrow. It's just how it works.
So stay informed, keep an eye on the rates, and be ready for changes. But what about these lending protocols being governed by DAOs? Isn't that another risk?
We're thinking critically that's important. Yes, there's protocol, governance risk. Token holders can vote on changes to the protocol, which could impact things like interest rates or collateralization ratios.
So the rules of the game could change, and that could affect my lending strategy.
Exactly. Stay informed about any changes to the protocol and participate in governance if you hold the protocol's governance token.
Wow. There's a lot to think about. So let's recap for our listeners who are thinking about trying DeFi lending. What are the absolute must-knows?
First, do your research. Understand the lending protocol you're considering. Read the documentation, check community forums, look into their track record. The more you know, the better decisions you can make.
Okay, knowledge is power. What else should be on our DeFi lending checklist?
Pay attention to collateralization ratios, understand the requirements, and what could happen if your collateral value drops below that. You don't want to be surprised by a sudden liquidation.
Right. Nobody wants to lose their collateralization check. What about interest rates? Any advice there?
Remember those roller coasters? DeFi interest rates are always moving. Don't focus too much on a specific rate. Be prepared for changes and make sure your strategy considers rates going down as well as up.
Stay informed, monitor the rates, and be ready for volatility. Got it. Any last tips before we finish this part of our DeFi lending deep dive?
One more thing, don't forget about smart contract risk. Remember, these protocols are based on code, which can be vulnerable. Look for protocols with a good security record and that have been audited by reputable firms. AAVE, for example, has a good track record there.
Okay, smart contract security check. We've covered a lot.
Yeah.
But before we move on, I'm curious about the bigger picture. Where do you see DeFi lending going in the future?
What's exciting is we're still early in DeFi. It's changing fast, and the potential is huge. I think we'll see more user-friendly platforms and interfaces making DeFi lending easier for everyone to use.
That makes sense. Anything else you're excited about?
I'm really interested in the possibility of real-world assets being used in DeFi lending. Imagine using things like real estate or precious metals as collateral for DeFi loans. That could open up so many new opportunities.
Oh. Real-world assets in DeFi. Sounds like another deep dive waiting to happen. Maybe we can talk about that in a future episode.
Definitely. There's so much to explore in this space.
Okay, on that note, let's recap what we've learned about DeFi lending. It's an amazing opportunity to be your own bank, put crypto to work, and maybe earn some passive income.
It really is. And as DeFi keeps growing, we'll probably see even more innovative lending strategies and protocols.
That's definitely exciting. But before we get ahead of ourselves, let's talk about being careful with DeFi lending.
Absolutely. It's easy to get caught up in the potential for high returns, but it's just as important to understand the risks.
Exactly. It's all about balance. So as we wrap up this part, what advice would you give to our listeners who are interested in DeFi lending and want to start exploring? It all comes back to being your own bank. It's powerful, but what does it really mean for DeFi lending?
It's about taking control of your money, breaking free from traditional finance. With DeFi lending, you're both lender and borrower. You set the terms and get the rewards.
So instead of tiny interest from a bank, I can lend directly through DeFi and maybe get much higher returns.
Exactly. And it's more than just interest. DeFi lending also opens up borrowing. You can use crypto as collateral for loans. No credit checks or long approvals.
Like cutting out the middleman and all the red tape. Pretty compelling argument for DeFi lending. Can you give our listeners an example of what being your own bank with DeFi lending could look like?
Let's say you want to buy a house, but instead of a traditional mortgage, you use your crypto. You deposit your crypto into a DeFi lending protocol as collateral and borrow stablecoins against it. Then you use those stablecoins to buy the house.
Wait, I can buy a house with a DeFi loan. No banks, no credit checks. Sounds almost too good to be true.
It's a vision of the future where DeFi is a real alternative to traditional finance. It's not as crazy as it sounds. People are already exploring this like crypto-backed mortgages.
Wow, that's incredible. Like something from science fiction. But what about the risks? We talked about smart contracts, liquidity, and interest rates. Wouldn't those be bigger with something like a mortgage?
You're right. The risks are real and we need to be careful. DeFi is still young. There's a lot to do with regulation, security, and user experience.
So it's not a perfect solution, but it has huge potential. What advice would you give to listeners who like this idea of being their own bank with DeFi lending? How should they start exploring?
Start small and learn as you go. Don't jump in all at once. Try different protocols. Lend and borrow small amounts to see how it works. And never invest more than you can afford to lose.
That's good advice.
Yeah.
It's about taking those first steps and getting comfortable.
Exactly. And don't forget the DeFi community. There are lots of resources, online educational materials, and communities for specific protocols. Ask questions and connect with others on this journey. We're all learning together.
Absolutely. Sharing knowledge and supporting each other as we explore this new world. We've covered so much today, from DeFi lending basics to becoming our own banks.
It's been great. I always enjoy talking about these topics and sharing what I know.
To our listeners, thanks for joining us on this DeFi lending adventure. We hope you learned a lot and see how powerful decentralized finance can be.
Keep exploring, keep learning, and join us next time when we'll look at the other side, borrowing in DeFi.
Until then, stay curious and keep on diving deep.